Welcome everyone to the final plenary and closing ceremony of the 8th Global Symposium on Health Systems Research. We will start with the final plenary with the theme, Knowledge for Just Health Systems. The focus of today's session is how knowledge itself, how we produce it, who produces it, and how we share it can either reinforce inequities or drive transformation towards justice. We will explore 3 interconnected issues that are crucial to this endeavor: epistemic justice, the values guiding our work, and how we disseminate and translate knowledge for broader impact. My name is Amaya, and I am a health policy and systems researcher from El Salvador. I am currently based at Pace University in New York, where I am associate professor in health policy. My research focuses on multi-level governance for health and how it impacts health systems around the world, and the themes that we will discuss today very much resonate with my work. In addition to my work in academia, I am also the incoming Vice Chair of Health Systems Global, and very honored today to chair this plenary. I also want to remind everyone that, as in all of our plenary sessions this week, you will be invited to participate using the Slido app, as well as a virtual participation tool. Please connect via the QR code that you will see on the big screen later in the session, and we will invite questions for the panel, and this will be your way of joining in the conversation. Our first theme, that of epistemic injustice, aims to look critically at how the production of knowledge for health policy and systems is structured by hierarchies of evidence, expertise, and language. Although inroads have been made to recognize these hierarchies, they still play an outsized role in marginalizing certain forms of knowledge, especially local, indigenous, and experiential knowledge, while privileging others. If we are serious about building just health systems, we must critically examine the root causes of those power dynamics and work toward a more inclusive process of knowledge co-production. This brings us to the second pillar of today's plenary, the importance of surfacing the values that guide our decisions in health systems. Too often, these values, powerful though they are, remain implicit, shaping policy choices in ways that reinforce existing inequities. What we prioritize in research, teaching, and policy, whether it be justice or efficiency, equity, or cost-effectiveness, has profound implications for those whose health is prioritized and which needs are met. As we strive to build sustainable health systems, it is essential that we surface these values, critically interrogate them, and ask whether they align with the broader goals of justice, inclusion, and sustainability. By making these values explicit, we can better understand how they shape our work and ensure that we are building systems that not only serve current populations, but do so in ways that protect the planet for future generations. Finally, knowledge is only as powerful as our ability to disseminate and translate it into meaningful action. Health systems are inherently complex, and our task is to make sense of this complexity in ways that are accessible and actionable for all stakeholders. These are policymakers, practitioners, communities, and especially marginalized groups. We must learn to communicate, educate, draft policy, and advocate in ways that better convey the values we wish to see reflected in our health systems. Effective translation and dissemination of knowledge must empower these stakeholders to engage in health system strengthening efforts in a meaningful way. Of course, these 3 domains, epistemic justice, values, and knowledge dissemination, are deeply interconnected and profoundly impact what we mean when we say we wish to build just health systems. So as we move forward in today's discussions, I encourage you to reflect on how we can collectively challenge existing power structures, surface the values that guide our work, and disseminate knowledge in ways that empower all people and protect the planet. With that, let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Associate Professor Seye Abimbola. Dr. Abimbola is a health systems researcher from Nigeria, currently based at the University of Sydney in Australia, where he is an associate professor and principal research fellow. His teaching, research, and writing focus is on knowledge practices in global health, health system governance, and health system innovations. Seye was inaugural editor-in-chief of BMJ Global Health from 2015 to 2024, the Radulvaki Visiting Scholar in Global Health at Northwestern University in the United States, and the Prince Claus Chair at Utrecht University from 2020 to 2022 in the Netherlands for his work on justice in global health research. He also received an Australian Research Council Discovery Award in 2023 to study dignity-based practices in health equity research. Our second speaker is Professor Chelsea Watego. Professor Watego is a Mununjarli and South Sea Islander woman with over 20 years of experience working with Indigenous health as a health worker and researcher. She is Executive Director of QUT's Karumba Institute, and her scholarship has drawn attention to the role of race in the production of health inequalities. Professor Watego's current Australian Research Council Discovery Grant seeks to build an Indigenous health humanities as a new field of research, one that is committed to the survival of Indigenous peoples locally and globally, foregrounding Indigenous intellectual sovereignty and leading to the formation of an Indigenous critical race theory. She is a prolific writer and public intellectual, having written for Indigenous X, National Indigenous TV, The Guardian, and The Conversation. She is a founding board member of Inarla Wungra, an Indigenous Community Development Association within her community, as well as director of the Institute for Collaborative Race Research. Our third speaker is Dr. Margareta Matache. Dr. Matache is a Roma rights activist from Romania and lecturer on social and behavioral sciences at the Department of Social and Behavioral Sciences with the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Dr. Matache was co-founder and director of the Roma program at the FXB Center for Health and Human Rights at Harvard University. Her research focuses on the manifestations and impacts of racism and other systems of oppression in different geographical and political contexts. Her research examines discrimination, reparations, social determinants of health, including education and social and economic disparities, and their nexus with the historical past and contemporary public policies, with a particular focus on anti-Roma racism. She is also a member of the O'Neill Lancet Commission on Racism, Structural Discrimination, and Global Health. Our fourth speaker is Fatuma Gulein. Fatuma is PhD Fellow at the Kemri Wellcome Trust Research Program in Kenya. Over the past couple of years, she has been actively involved in knowledge translation initiatives at local and regional level, supporting the uptake of research findings for policy within her organization. She is currently pursuing a PhD focused on reframing knowledge translation for health policymaking in Kenya. She is also a member of the Emerging Voices for Global Health Fellowship Program and is representing her program here today. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce our panel moderator for this session, Dr. Prashanth Srinivas. Dr. Prashanth is a medical doctor with a PhD in public health and director of the Institute of Public Health in Bengaluru, India. As lead of the Health Equity Cluster at IPH, his work critically examines the apparently transformative dimensions of technological solutions to health inequities vis-à-vis addressing fundamental issues of social inequality, exclusion, and governance. Through a fellowship from the DBT Wellcome Trust India Alliance, he has set up collaborations to examine health inequities in Indigenous communities in multiple remote forested locations in southern, central, and northeast India. Prashanth previously served as the chair of the governance group for the Emerging Voices group for Global Health of AHSG, and is a member of the General Council of the Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp, Belgium. And with that, I would like to welcome our first speaker, Associate Professor Seye Abimbola, to the podium.
I feel like I should mention as well that I was an emerging voice in the same year as Prashanth was in 2010. In the last 5 to 7 years, there's been a literature that has been growing in global health. It's often referred to as the decolonizing global health literature. And that literature has, in large part, been originated and promoted and pushed by people who are from or in lower middle-income countries. And in some sense, it is a literature of complaints about how global health works. Now, that literature addresses very many issues in global health. There's a strand of it that interests me particularly, which is the one that is about knowledge and knowledge practices in global health. And in that strand of that literature, I've often described it as the complaints literature in global health. And that literature seeks to surface what these complaints have been about how knowledge is produced, how it is used, and how it is shared in global health. And we synthesized a sample of that literature from 12 journals and published that earlier in this year. And with that synthesis, what we did was to categorize those complaints along the framing of epistemic injustice that was advanced by Miranda Fricker, a British feminist scholar. And what she did was to define what epistemic injustice is in terms of testimonial or hermeneutical injustice. And testimonial injustice comes about because people are afforded less credibility, especially marginalized people. And hermeneutical marginalization or interpretive marginalization occurs because people who are marginalized, in other ways, are also marginalized in their ability to interpret their reality, communicate their reality, frame it in the way that best serves their needs. Now, after having synthesized that complaint literature, what we felt was important to do was then to look at the expectations that those complaints fell short of. In other words, when you complain about something, when you say something is not right, you are also saying implicitly, and some of these authors were very explicit, that there's an expectation, there's something that is good, that this thing has fallen short of. So what we did was to, again, synthesize and identify what those expectations are. And that's what I'm going to describe to you in this talk. I should acknowledge that this work was led by a PhD student who works with me at the University of Sydney, Alice Bayingana. She's somewhere in the room. There are 4 expectations, and I'll go through each of them one by one. The first one is transparency. And transparency because there's a reality of epistemic pluralism. In other words, there are many ways of doing anything we do as researchers. There are different ways of framing a question, of targeting a question. There are different ways of sharing knowledge. There are different ways of doing everything we do. And we often default to the ones that serve those of us who have power in that relationship that we have with the communities that we seek to serve. In other words, when we seek to make knowledge, when we seek to make health systems just, what is implicit in that quest is that there are people that that system treats unjustly, people that are marginalized by that system. And what we're often trying to do when we do research then is to either study them, work alongside them, work on their behalf, or work as part of that group. But very often, because we have power as researchers and we approach our work from a position of the privilege that makes us researchers in the first place, we often defer to our own preferences and the things that serve us. And so it's important that we are able to be transparent about the choices we've made so that they are open to scrutiny, so that we are also able to justify why we have not included the preferences, including the ways in which people who are otherwise marginalized for different reasons, frame their realities. And in this, I often think of how we apportion frameworks to describe and define the realities of people who are marginalized. For example, we use framing such as resilience, which sometimes makes sense, but often does not. We use framing such as health security to describe that which we are trying to achieve. Sometimes we cast a label of corruption on perhaps practices that are themselves complex adaptive responses to corruption. So that's transparency. The second expectation is non-extraction. And that comes from the premise that very often, in fact, typically, the ways in which we do research do not serve the material and epistemic needs of the people we aim to serve. In other words, when we construct a research question, we're often trying to answer questions that we have, not questions that people we're trying to serve have. We're trying to construct questions that serve our learning needs or the learning needs of people who fund us, who want questions answered, and not the learning needs of the people we seek to serve. We often begin not from what the people in those spaces and in those situations are already doing with knowledge. And perhaps if we have a role to help that along, how we do that. So taking very seriously the responsibility to not be extractive. Again, not just epistemically, but materially. Because there are times as well when we take materially without giving. So that's the second expectation. The third one is democratization. And democratization in the sense that we cede power to the people who are marginalized, whom we seek to serve. Now, this is a particular expectation I've found difficult to communicate, especially to researchers, because we love our power, and we believe we have the right to have research questions about the life of other people. It's a strange thing to think about, that you shouldn't enter into a person's room and seek to check what's underneath their bed without them, in fact, welcoming you and stewarding that entire process. It is the same way we should think about research, that this is not for us primarily. It is for the people we seek to serve. And this expectation speaks to what that looks like in concrete terms in how we design the work that we do, whether it's in producing knowledge, sharing it, or using it. The final expectation is transformation. Now, transformation in the sense that if people are marginalized and we seek justice on their behalf and alongside them, it would also mean then that what we are seeking to do will aim not just at the present problem and the downstream issues that we see, but we go up to challenge the structures that create those problems in the first place. Now, very often, again, because of who funds us, because of whom we are, there's a tendency to just look at the downstream issues. Find a little app somewhere, find a little intervention somewhere, do a little tweak here and there. And we shy away, typically, very often, from the structural conditionings of those realities that people face. And again, what does it look like? We should keep asking ourselves to really construct our research in ways that trouble those structures. Now, in many ways, the reasons why we do the things that we do and the reasons why we do them the way we do them is in large part because of how we've been trained and how we've been socialized as researchers. What we've been told we have rights and claims to, and what we've been told is the right way to do research. But what this set of expectations by authors of this literature is demanding of us is to re-examine and re-evaluate the premise on which we do the work that we do. That if we are really committed and if we really want to serve the purpose that we claim to want to serve, we would have to really reorganize, not just how we do research, but the assumptions that we take into that research, including the assumptions of our own power and how we use that power in the spaces within which we do research. I'm looking forward to engaging with other panelists on this discussion, and I look forward to engaging with the audience as well, because this is a message that is primarily for the audience in this room. We are in a health systems research symposium. We have responsibilities, and we should live up to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Abimbola. Really important insights, and also very much looking forward to the panel discussion. Next, I would like to call on Professor Watego to the podium.
Thank you. Today I want to speak to a field in formation from the place in which I come, which is a settler colonial state of so-called Australia. And I want to speak of Indigenous health humanities, and I ask you to suspend your imagining of indigeneity and Indigenous knowledge systems, not as something that solves the problem of Indigenous peoples, but as a way of thinking differently about knowledge production as public health professionals. Indigenous health humanities seeks to redefine the parameters in which we understand both health and humanity through a foregrounding of Indigenous sovereignty, locally and globally, and represents my reply to the question of knowledge for just health. Rather than be positioned as a peoples destined to die or research to death, Indigenous health humanities as a field is based on an Indigenous imagining of a future stretching out as far in front of us as the past behind us. This field emerged from a multidisciplinary team of Indigenous and non-Indigenous academics concerned with Indigenous health and wellbeing in its very broadest sense, encompassing the historical, political, cultural, social and economic conditions of Indigenous life worlds. The epidemiological narrative has become a taken-for-granted feature of Indigenous health discourse in recent decades. However, these statistical portraits have not brought the rewards that a scientific imagination might assume, such as a more organised examination of the production of health disparities, including the practices of health research, policy and service provision, and the social, political, economic and historical conditions that create and maintain such inequalities. Epidemiology has long been the conjoint of how Australians have come to know Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. This knowing has painted Indigenous peoples into a bleak corner of humanity where we are reduced to a continuum of just 4 possibilities: at risk of sickness, sick, dying, or dead. A discipline so neutral it cannot, or rather will not, account for state-sanctioned violence, oppression and dispossession in ways that could describe, explain, predict and control inequity, but instead reinforces whiteness as superior, the norm by which the diseased and deviant Indigenous population will be measured. We must move beyond the white supremacist logic of whiteness as equating to wellness. Inasmuch as the discipline has contributed to highlighting the health inequities experienced by Indigenous peoples, it has created, produced and perpetuated accounts of alarming negative statistical portraits that garner little to no action, as they simultaneously render Indigenous people less than human and less capable of living a healthy life, and most definitely deemed incapable to have control over our own affairs, which has material consequences for us. The gap of Indigenous health inequality continues to be a known problem with unknown solutions, attributed to a mysterious failure in resourcing and implementation despite renewed commitments or refreshed numerical targets. Neither statistically significant nor culturally significant, indigeneity comes to represent a category of risk in health research and health care, devoid of rights, but in need of being known or killed. Indigenous health humanities bridges the knowledge gap by broadening the intellectual investment inviting humanities and social science perspectives about the social world that Indigenous peoples occupy to better understand its role in the production of health, illness and inequality, which one would think would be supported given public health's interest in the social and cultural determinants of health. The case for Indigenous health humanities emerges out of an inglorious history of health research in the Australian context, from its past silence to its present and persisting failures. It is outrage at the injustice of inequality that forms the foundation of this field. It provides us with the imperative to act in service of the supposed subjects of study rather than performing the illusion of objective and impartial knowers of that experience. The fetichised search for best practice located within conservative positivist research agendas camouflage rather than address injustice. Thus, it is rage that fuels the formation of this field. The parameters of this field emerged from a one-day workshop convened in my home community of Inala in Brisbane, one of the supposedly poorest and blackest neighbourhoods. The Inala Manifesto represents 6 foundational values that provide the framework for forging a new field of research, which I want to outline here. Indigenous health humanities is research that recognises that the prevailing Indigenous health research paradigm is an apparatus of colonial control, and thus calls for a resistance against the ideological foundations which insist that ill health experienced by Indigenous peoples is a product of Indigenous deficit, biologically or culturally. It requires us to shift our gaze from the research questions that ultimately ask what is wrong with black and brown people, to instead examine the structures bearing down on our bodies. It foregrounds Indigenous intellectual sovereignty, recognising the centrality of an Indigenous criticality to Indigenous health advancement, which is defined by Indigenous peoples, making visible the strength, capability and humanity of Indigenous peoples in all processes and products. It means that we must redefine and return to our own conceptualisations of health, humanity and humanity on our own terms. It recognises health and well-being as a fundamental human right, including recognition of Indigenous peoples' unique rights as articulated by the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. As Indigenous rights are highly contested, health is a matter of justice, and health research too becomes a question of politics and political struggle, rather than simply the production of an evidence base for action. It means our intellectual work will go beyond policy briefs to helping to inform legal cases against the system. It means careers not built on commissioned work by the state, but becoming enemies of it. It requires us to attend to the nature and function of race within an Australian context, and not just in how Indigenous people experience racism in the health system, but more broadly how race operates in the everyday, from birth to death, including the embodied consequences of racism. And this includes understanding Indigenous strategies and innovation around anti-racist resistance. It demands a courage of health researchers to shift the gaze away from Indigenous incapability to consider how institutions, structures, systems and processes operate to undermine Indigenous health and well-being. Consequently, it is also concerned with developing the researcher's toolkit beyond the academy as a public intellectual and a change maker. It means moving beyond measuring impact according to H indexes and academic papers and conference presentations. It considers disciplinary disloyalty a form of academic excellence, demanding a shared allegiance to Indigenous health advancement and action rather than an adherence to disciplinary knowledges and power. In this instance, the sociologist, the medical anthropologist, the political scientist, the race scholar, the legal scholar, the philosopher, are all integral to the health research team, as are the clinician and the epidemiologist. It is precisely with the collective coming together on the terms articulated here that new conceptual tools and frameworks can be brought to bear to carve out the necessary landscapes for imagining and enabling Indigenous health and wellness. It shifts us from simply building in knowledge translation strategies to centering health transformation in our study designs. Through this work, the categories of health research and health research will be widened, thus also broadening the possibilities for current Indigenous health research investments beyond the existing individualised, medicalised, deficit-based capacity building approaches. Indigenous health humanities insists upon a foregrounding of Indigenous intellectual sovereignty to resist and remedy the prevailing racist research paradigms found across both health and humanities. It is not a field whose parameters are defined by the indigeneity of researchers or research subjects. Rather, it is a field that regards Indigenous knowledges as foundational for knowing not just an ancient past, but a possible and more just future. It requires a new Indigenous health research paradigm that can revitalise efforts to improve health beyond an Indigenous Australian context. Indigenous health humanities offers the required critical imagination for better understanding the complexities of the social and the cultural in producing ill health and promoting better health. Through this, we might come to realise the limitations of drawing too heavily upon a medical response for what is effectively a socio-political problem. It enables a shift in focus for researchers from documenting and attempting to address inequalities between Indigenous peoples and a non-Indigenous norm, to creating the conditions through which Indigenous peoples' understandings and sovereign expressions of health and wellbeing might be realised. Indigenous health advancement is as much a matter of strategy as it is a matter of knowledges, and a stress on broadening research methods is designed to level the Western epistemological edifice that presently maintains the status quo. While health humanities has gained some traction within the academy, it remains removed from those for whom health outcomes are the worst. Indigenous health humanities would not emulate but disrupt the abiding yet less than inclusive understandings of what the academy and wider public health discourse take health humanities to be. This new field provides an intellectual home for the exiled intellectuals whose work is committed to the special duty of addressing the constituted and authorised powers of one's own society. That being said, such a home is open to expansion to accommodate the increasing members who find warmth and solidarity in the refusal of injustice that binds us intellectually and politically to such a place. Inasmuch as this is an intellectual project, the political nature of it demands a strategising that attends to, rather than acts in spite of, the forces of marginalisation that such scholars are subject to. Indigenous health humanities offers an original way of asking new questions of old problems, as well as contesting the very construction of these problems. Indigenous health humanities is a field of research that disavows black lack and instead marshals various methods commonly used in the humanities to investigate the ways in which power is configured to the detriment of Indigenous peoples' health and well-being. As the oldest continuing culture on the planet, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have as much to teach about survivance in a rapidly changing world. To think globally through indigeneity is to return to a future that foregrounds Indigenous sovereignty, sustainability and relationality. These principles can guide the transdisciplinary turn which is still firmly wedded to conceptions of modernity and change, the very ideas that generated some of the global challenges we face, not just those uniquely experienced by Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Watego. A lot to think about there, and really looking forward again to a very lively discussion. Next, we have Dr. Matache, who unfortunately was not able to join us today due to some unforeseen personal circumstances, but she did send us a video recording, which we will watch now.
Hello everyone, I am honored to contribute to this panel discussion, even if only virtually, and I'm grateful for the chance to bring the Roma experiences into this global conversation on health systems. In my presentation, I will discuss links between hegemonic knowledge production, anti-Roma racism, and health systems, underscoring the need to shift toward anti-racist health research frameworks and initiatives. As some of you may know, roughly 12 million of the global Roma diaspora resides in Europe. despite Europe's wealth, primarily driven by colonization, imperialism, and resource exploitation in other regions, the health and well-being of the continent's Roma population remain significantly lower than that of white Europeans. The Roma people, particularly women, poor Roma, and those residing in segregated settlements, live shorter and sicker lives than non-Roma populations. Across European Union countries with large Roma population, on average, Roma women live 11 years less than the rest of the population. The difference is 9.1 for men. Many existing health inequities are driven by structural anti-Roma racism, which directly or indirectly affects every element of the health systems, from healthcare facilities to service delivery and health information systems. For instance, on average, maternity hospitals in Romania send Roma women and their newborns home up to 4 days earlier than non-Roma women in similar circumstances. Generally, the patterns of discrimination and social and structural inequities in Roma health in Europe mirror those observed in other racialized and historically colonized and oppressed groups in the US, Latin America, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, or India. Now, we know that research can influence and provide insights into the functioning of health systems and the trajectories of health policies. Yet much of the existing Roma-focused research has largely explored and isolated a few social determinants of health, particularly social and economic status, health behaviors, and discrimination, as well as several assumed determinants such as culture, lifestyle, and genes. Essentially, the existing Roma health scholarship has not measured and analyzed the levels and manifestations of anti-Roma racism as health stressors, or the nexuses between health and scarce common resources, systemic disinvestment, or environmental injustices. Generally, 4 major analytical models have been used in knowledge production to unpack health disparities between Roma people and dominant populations: a genetic model, a contagion model, a behavioral model, and a poverty model. In this presentation, I will point to a few biases and limitations in the genetic model within Roma-related research, emphasizing connections between historical and present-day hegemonic methods and theories. The genetic model, for instance, has old roots in pseudoscientific race science. In the 18th and 19th century, although race theories did not measure Roma skulls or assign Roma as a race in the main theories of races, influential scholars advanced claims that Roma people were a distinct or singular race. The genetic model in Roma-related research also has tied with eugenicists and Nazi-affiliated scholars who focused on proving genetic differences and hierarchies, human hierarchies between groups. They also furthered the myth of fixed genetic differences between Roma people and white Europeans and deemed Roma people racially inferior. Essentially, science has gradually geneticized, biologized, and further racialized a super heterogeneous and historically and geographically dispersed Romani population. In European research, the racialized Roma, inferior, criminal, dark-skinned, non-white, non-Christian, non-European, became framed not solely as an inferior social or racial category, but also as a distinct and inferior genetic category. Such conceptual framing have helped legitimize racialized health practices and state violence, and strengthen the tie between political power and knowledge production. This long-standing history of race science is important for understanding current assumptions in Roma-related health research and practices. Its legacies persist in contemporary research that submits a diverse Roma population as a genetically isolated and homogeneous population. For instance, many contemporary studies start from the premise that the Roma people have a higher rate of consanguinity than white Europeans. However, this general known fact, as white scholars describe it based on cultural and ethnographic studies, has never been backed up by genetic or sociological studies inclusive of or exploring Roma subgroups comparatively. In the same line of thought, genetic studies involving Roma individuals have most frequently used extremely small sample sizes or conducted research solely in residentially segregated Roma neighborhoods. However, the health of individuals and families who live in segregated communities and are more exposed to lingering systemic disinvestment cannot be isolated from the history, hidden and unhidden expressions, and lived experiences of anti-Roma racism and other structural forces that differently affect varied Roma individuals. Similarly, the behavioral model in research and health interventions has built on a myth of a homogeneous and vague lifestyle and distinct Roma health-related behaviors. While this idea of a lifestyle has had multiple meanings in research, it has commonly functioned as a racially charged descriptor, often reviving the deep-seated racist belief in the cultural and behavioral inferiority of the Roma people. This race-coded attribute has replaced the depictions of the Romani people as nomadic or implicitly unhygienic, spreaders of contagion, or uncivilized. Moreover, I would say that the poverty model is more advanced and perhaps a little bit more effective. However, many such studies follow a liberal approach in measuring poverty at individual and family levels, thus overlooking the structural dimensions of racialized poverty, which are collective, interlinked, interactive, and enduring. Moreover, while the poverty model has identified ethnicity as a determinant of health, it has not yet studied ethnicity as a proxy for racism and racism as a structural determinant of Roma health. My general point is that the existing knowledge and analytical models do not help us much to advance just health systems and practices. To understand and address social and structural inequities in health, particularly when it comes to historically racialized and oppressed groups, the traditional frameworks of social, behavioral, or genetic determinants of health are not enough. We need to consider broader and intertwined structural, political, socioeconomic, and environmental factors that contribute to health disparities among individuals and populations. There is a need to move from isolating a single factor's causal effect to understanding the functioning of the system as a whole. As Nancy Krieger argues, politics, policies, historical, societal, and ecological conditions also interact and influence populations' health and drive the distribution of disease or health. To step into a new era of health research that can inform anti-racist health systems, it is essential to establish new methodological, analytical, and ethical frameworks that prioritize anti-racism, non-extractivism, and respect. The ethical elements of these frameworks should not only emphasize data protection and informed consent, but also prioritize community participation throughout research stages to ensure that both research and health systems reflect their needs and priorities. Finally, we should not have to say this over and over again, but research concerning historically oppressed groups must prioritize equitable partnerships and spaces for scholars from those communities to take the lead. Only this fundamental principle can help us achieve transformative change towards health equity and just anti-racist health systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Matache. It is now my pleasure to invite to the podium Fatuma Gulein, a representative of the wonderful and powerful Emerging Voices for Global Health program.
Thanks, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here today to take this stage representing the 2024 cohort of the Emerging Voices for Global Health. And the Emerging Voices for Global Health is a network that is shaping the future of health systems and health systems research by nurturing the voices and amplifying these voices of young health systems thinkers. And we, as Emerging Voices, are here because we believe our voice matters. The perspectives of those who are just beginning their journey into this field can bring in unique ideas, fresh ideas, and perhaps even instill a fresh dose of idealism that is needed to challenge the norms that have been perpetuating a lot of the injustices that we see within our health systems. As young health systems thinkers, we are embedded within the realities of a world in crisis, a world that is grappling with health systems inequities and injustice. And so because we're new to this space, we are forced to push the boundaries and to ask uncomfortable questions. Over the past week, I have been enjoying very much the brilliant presentations and conversations that we've been having about health systems. And I have felt both inspired and a little uneasy. I felt inspired by the commitment and passion that I have seen in health systems, actors and researchers, advocates and activists who have shared their knowledge and expertise with me. But I've also felt uneasy because sometimes a lot of those conversations felt very familiar. Take, for example, the discussions around evidence dissemination, knowledge to action, knowledge translation, or whatever you'd like to call it. We've been circling around the same questions for decades. How do we make research more relevant to policymakers? How do we get them to use it? How do we bridge the gap between knowledge and doing? And these conversations and questions have been asked for very long. And it makes me question, are we really addressing the issues that matter? Issues that lie at the intersection of power, values, and injustice. So when we talk about translating knowledge for action, we should ask ourselves, are we truly tackling the barriers that exist and that prevent us from using all of the knowledge that we have gathered and produced to actually have impact on health system policies and practice? A lot of what we have found, what we talk about, fails to capture what's at the heart of the issue, which is power. We spend a lot of time writing policy briefs, holding dissemination workshops, as if what is missing is another polished PDF. But we keep skirting around the issue of power and values. Values are what drives decision-making. Values tell us why or how governments prioritize funding wars and militaries and conflict rather than spending money on healthcare. Values underpin the decisions and the prioritizations of these decisions in thinking about making health systems more efficient rather than making them more equitable. So the issue isn't really a lack of knowledge. We have abundant knowledge. The issue isn't about translating that knowledge into action. The issue is about challenging power. Power determines whose knowledge matters. It determines who gets a seat at the table, at the decision-making table, and once they're there, whose voices are heard and whose voices are ignored. So if we're truly serious about using all of the knowledge that we have to improve our health systems and to make them more just, then we must stop sidestepping the issue of power, and we must confront it head-on. And to do this, the first step is to make explicit the values that drive these decisions. And we saw a lot of this happening during the COVID-19 pandemic, as a great example. A lot of nations hoarded the vaccine while others scrambled. And this showed us something. It showed us that some lives mattered more than others, and that these decision makers prioritized geopolitical leverage and profit over basic health equity. But power isn't fixed. It can be redistributed, it can be shaped, and it can be challenged. And so we must ask ourselves as health system, as the HPSR community, what practical steps can we take to challenge this power? And it's really important to note also that we are not powerless in and of ourselves, and so we have the responsibility to take a step forward when it comes to challenging this power. One of the key strategies that we could use, of course, is to go back to our communities and to center them, to empower them so that they are not just passive receivers of knowledge and policies, but rather they are active co-decision makers. Take the example of participatory budgeting in Brazil in the 1980s. It transformed the ways in which local governments allocated resources. Citizens, especially those who are marginalized, were able to co-decide how public funds should be used. Another step we can take is collective action. There is a lot of power in collective action, and networks such as the Health Systems Global and the Emerging Voices for Global Health should embody this. We are almost 2,000 researchers and activists and practitioners strong, and we span across entire continents and disciplines. But networks also have to go beyond sharing resources and knowledge. We must challenge actively the unjust systems in which we are operating within. We must also go beyond just raising the voices of communities, but also empowering them to shape these processes themselves. And here it's easy to say we need to empower communities. Oftentimes we fail in our efforts because we have these assumptions about who holds knowledge and who needs it. So empowering communities to do this type of thing requires us to take a step back, to be more humble, to practice humility, and to allow them to shape the very processes that drive the inequities that they face. Collective action can also be leveraged in other ways. Sometimes it is about refusing to let disinformation and misinformation go unchecked. In a world of post-truth where disinformation is running rampant, it would be an abdication of our responsibilities to stick within our academic boundaries. Social media platforms have democratized the ways in which we produce and share knowledge, but it has also been weaponized to spread lies and disinformation. But it can also be used to amplify truths. During the pandemic, young people used platforms such as TikTok as a public health advocacy tool, and they used humor and cultural relevance to reach audiences that we could never reach with our traditional dissemination tools and platforms. Finally, understanding the intersections of power, values, and injustice, we must also look inwards at the systems in which we operate, at how we produce knowledge, and at how we share it. And it should be, and so when we think about knowledge translation as a final takeaway and disseminating evidence, it shouldn't just be about getting evidence to the people who need it. It should also be about transforming the power structures and the value structures that continue to perpetuate the injustices that we are faced with. So we, as researchers, as advocates, as activists, as health systems practitioners, we can no longer afford to sit back and let the research speak for itself. We must take action because not doing so is going to be unethical at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fatuma. You've given us a lot to think about. Now, to explore these themes further, I am happy to hand over to our moderator, Dr. Prashanth, who will lead us in a panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And fascinating, hasn't it been? It's so amazing to hear people from different parts of the world with such a powerful common thread that spans all the four amazing presentations. Let me begin by looking at ourselves. Like Seye and many other speakers reminded us, we Health Systems Global, we the Health Policy and Systems Research community, I think the four powerful talks today bring the attention, in addition to all the injustice and inequalities in the world, it brings the attention, I think, to ourselves as researchers. I think we often look at ourselves as relatively powerless and locating the power in funders and in policy makers, etc. But I think the talks beautifully show that framing the problem is a power that I think we often do not realize that we possess. How are we problematizing? What are we problematizing? Whom are we problematizing is a power we have. And I think we are often either actually unconscious or choose to be unconscious about it because it brings up very much uncomfortable questions within us as to what we choose to study. Let me maybe start, if I have the time, pointing to another excellent article recently in the Lancet by Seye, which looks at such contestations that are so often not well reflected upon in our community. And I'll take the opportunity, Seye and others, if you permit me to read this out. It is the line between lionizing the marginalized and demonizing the powerful, between noting the differences between groups and applying the differences to individuals, between seeing connections among people and singling out one group when you speak up, between noting the agency of people from the marginalized groups and only emphasizing their suffering, between recognizing progress and drawing attention only to inequities, between recognizing that each group is both fragile and strong and framing marginalized groups as necessarily fragile and those with power as necessarily strong, between fighting with love and fighting like a monster. I think these are these tensions and contestations that Seye points out in this paper came as a common thread in all the four presentations, and I really invite each of us as we listen to the reflections from our speakers to have this inward conversation within us. How conscious are we of these contestations in the disciplines and the problems that we study? And if we are conscious, are we willing to embrace the discomfort that comes with these contestations? Are we able, even if we are willing, do we have the ability to deal with the contestations? Sometimes it means letting go of very attractive funding opportunities. Sometimes it means changing our location from a place of comfort to a place of discomfort. Sometimes it means willing to be challenged on a potential social position that we might be occupying. But along with this, we also have many of us in the community, me, myself included, who who might be unconscious too of many of these problems that are being pointed out by our speakers. So with this, maybe I invite in the same order reflections on these and all of the other speakers' issues that came up. Maybe we can start with you, Seye.
Thank you. I've been thinking a lot about unawareness as a thing. Because there's a sense in which everything we've talked about are things we can't claim to not know, really. None of those values, none of those expectations, none of those problems with research that have been highlighted by each of us is strange to any of us in this room or any researcher in the community of researchers we belong to. But there's a way in which we manage to continue to do what we do in spite of either knowing these things or having the opportunity to know them that we do not take. So I'm interested very much in what that means. And I'll give a couple of examples. There are ways in which you frame problems. As you said, that's one of the powers that we have. That we know are contested and contestable. But those framings tend to be the ones that funders want to fund. Mm-hmm. And we know. And then we will proceed to apply for such a grant, knowing full well that that framing will harm people, or at least will marginalize people's interpretation of their own realities. And then we will get the money and we will do the research and we will manage to convince ourselves that we've done the right thing. Because my sense of human beings is that we are not able to do bad things knowingly. So we have to choose to argue to ourselves that the choices we've made are in fact the right choices. And I see that play out a lot, whether in interactions with individuals or in my former role as editor of a journal, that people make these choices about framing things that they will not back away from, even when they know they are problematic. I'm trying not to name framings here, because otherwise people will know that I'm talking about them. But there are those things that we do. And I think it's important to, in the secrets of our hearts and our rooms, be willing to acknowledge those things to ourselves and be willing to do better. And often doing better will involve collective action of some sort. That we all sort of agree that there are certain things we will stop doing. And I don't think we will get to that place without the open discomfort that I wish and hope that discussion, such as the one we are having now, may generate.
Absolutely. And let me come back as we hear the others to what can we do to more directly address this discomfort? What are the actions? So I would like to hear more about that as I move on.
Look, I entered public health as a student having just turned 17. And what struck me was, it was when I first discovered there was something wrong with us as a people. I didn't know that. The stories that were told at our kitchen table about who we are as a people were very different to the story public health told about us. And I physically felt that, and I felt it as a research assistant in the questions I was required to ask of my own community. What is wrong with you? And I'm struck by the space of public health and this presumed benevolence of the discipline. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when we had our post-colonial moment. In so-called Australia, public health was tropical health, and it was set up to, look at the ways in which the white population could live in the tropics and how to protect the white population from the unhygienic natives. So it never served our interest. And we think about scientific racism as a thing of the past. And it strikes me even being in this place, and you go to the museum and we focus on the science that created the weapon, but not the science that made it possible to execute it. And we're reminded in this time right now in terms of what's happening to Palestinian people. Mm-hmm. And we are all complicit in that. And so I'm struck by this kind of unknowingness about race science and how it plays out, and how careers have been built off that indifference to it. At the same time, those of us, I think the idea that if we just bring more colonised and marginalised people into public health, that will change it. We know that black faces in white spaces doesn't transform those systems. It transforms the experience for us that have to navigate it. And so my colleagues of colour who are grappling with the violence of public health, we're often having conversations about why, or seeing our power as a people outside of it. And the work that happens at the margins, because we have this idea that you change things at the centre, but it's at the edges where you push the parameters of what is possible. And if you have to concede so much to get entry in, why would you want to be in that place? Mm-hmm. And so I just want to finish with our Aboriginal community-controlled health sector emerged in the 1970s, where we were beneficiaries of a Black Power movement originating out of the US. We had our own factions of the Black Panther Party in Brisbane, where I live, and those people who formed that were the people who were the architects of the community-controlled model of primary healthcare that are still in effect today and represent the most effective model of primary healthcare. So it's in that resistance, in knowing our power, that we've conceived of a whole new way of delivering health to our people. And those services emerged out of the refusal of white GPs to see our people who were moving into the cities during that time. And so we have to speak to the violence of those certain institutions, but in the course of that, always remember our power as a people and what is possible when we refuse to buy into the logic of these violent systems. And so it means maybe letting go of the ideal career, as I think Seye refers, and finding that unique pleasure at the margins of things that we may not even conceive possible.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. Fatuma?
The issue of framing, at least when it comes to thinking about knowledge to policy, and this touches again on what both Seye and
Chelsea
and Chelsea has said, it really presents a lot of ethical dilemmas. Right now, the bread and butter of knowledge translation or any activities that seek to get research into policy is about impact. And funders are asking less about publications or more about impact, whatever that means. And so one of the things that you're always taught is you need to frame the research or the problem in a way that speaks to policymakers. And sometimes it doesn't speak to the people. But then this ethical dilemma comes in where I want the research to be used, but I don't want to frame it in a way that also dehumanizes when we think only about framing them in terms of economics and that it's cost effective and investments. I think people talk a lot about investing in healthcare, and it's not about just investments. And you then have to question, do I want to just accept those values and reframe my message in a way that sits comfortably with them, or do I want to challenge the very structures that hold that? So it's a lot of dilemmas that you have to think about, and I believe that they're very difficult to go around because you will be punished in one way or another through your career. But again, this is why collective action becomes really important, in that if we're all moving together in the same direction, then we can protect each other.
It's amazing, isn't it? So that means... Yeah, please go ahead.
I think collective discomfort is essential for that collective action. Right? And I think we protect ourselves from collective discomfort. There are things we do in our mind that help us preserve our comfort. And I think we need to learn to give in to that discomfort, otherwise we won't act.
I think it's a very human tendency, like you said, sometimes we know this, and then we say when we come to our grant writing desks or teaching desks or our formal desks, we realize, oh, this is something about society out there, which I'm only a researcher. I'm doing a grant, and somewhere we cope with this by framing ourselves as too vulnerable to be able to take this on. And while it's quite likely, Fatuma, that many, like myself, when I was an EV in Montreux, Seye was also an EV with me, and as was Taufik and a few others in the room. At that time, I do realize as early career researchers, there was a certain vulnerability into what we can do, what we can say. But how many of us are able to move on and reflect further as we increase our power and influence, then that becomes the time when we must deal with these uncomfortable questions as do I just do the same stuff, or do I sometimes take a more uncomfortable path and address some of this. Another powerful thing, again common but really emblematic in Margareta Matache's presentation was again on the framing, the 4 things. In different ways you all spoke about it. And she was of course talking about the Roma people when she said it's either something genetically that's problematic or unique, or it's contagion, something biological which affects them more, something they do or they don't do, behavior, or they're just poor and that's why they're unhealthy. Isn't this so commonly the problems that public health schools also teach? That this is the problem with populations out there. It's poverty, it's ignorance, and of course you do the multivariate statistics and illiteracy will be strongly predicting TB and everything else. So I want to hear some of your thoughts on how methodologically and how in the science and the practice of our science do we shake away, and how do we move beyond this kind of deficit kind of framings and narratives, because that's at the heart of how researchers are framing the problem. Any?
I mean, you go to any public health school and it's epidemiologists and clinicians. And that's the problem. They don't have the tools to do the work that needs to be done in terms of addressing power and inequalities. I mean, I find the various social determinants tables quite hilarious, and we're working on a paper at the moment doing a discourse analysis of these tables where these structures fit these little boxes and the arrows point in all kinds of directions. The epidemiologists cannot be trusted to address health inequalities. There's an evidence base that says that. I mean, that's what we say. We look at the evidence base. You know, as a qualitative researcher in public health, I've trained in public health, undergrad and postgrad, first class honours, Dean's commendation, but it was only 3 years ago that I actually had an academic appointment in a public health school. There is an exclusion of the types of knowledges that are needed to transform health outcomes, and that I don't know why it's absurd to have a political scientist and a race scholar sitting on health research teams. And sitting on research grant panels, there is very poor theorisation of things like settler colonialism and race. People are measuring things that they've not adequately defined, but are reinforcing the power of race in the course of that work. So I think the epidemiologists and the monopoly they hold in public health is a problem.
Thank you. So, yes.
Some of you are okay.
So I think the focus...
All the knowledge,
sorry?
It's about not possessing all the knowledge. And the authority that the epidemiologist has is the problem.
Sure. And I think you bring the focus to theory and theorizing, which is extremely important, because I often hear on this theme of knowledge on justice, me and my colleagues often fall into the trap that addressing inequalities and justice and these themes are some things that people who are involved with community processes or people doing community participation, it's them who has to deal with this. Whereas me, I'm designing a health system strengthening intervention, or I'm doing an implementation research. You know, this is not really about justice and rights and those kind of things. So I think the point you make about theorizing and the need for us researchers to bring some of those theories into implementation research, into health systems projects, into these large initiatives we might be advising, into policies, into designing programs, everywhere, isn't it, the role of this stuff? Any thoughts on this, Seye or Fatuma?
I love nice titles for papers, and there's a lovely title I saw last year, the lazy language of lifestyle. And I thought the alliterative perfection of that title is attractive, but I think it says a lot as well about the laziness, the intellectual laziness of a lot of this work that we're talking about. It's not just that it's wrong, it's also lazy. That we could do better. And I think that in time, we need to have a different idea of what good science is. Mm-hmm. I think part of all of this is that we have a construction in our mind of what good science looks like, what good research looks like. And that diverges significantly from science that can serve justice.
Can I push you? Yeah, sorry.
And by that I mean that we should get ourselves to a place where we can have a clear framework for calling out science that is bad science.
Mm-hmm.
Right? In other words, having a different set of expectations for what we should be doing. And as Chelsea was saying, if there is a study that fails to theorize properly and at the proper level of analysis of what inequities are, then it's bad science by definition. Mm-hmm. It is not just that they're using epidemiological methods, and so that method doesn't allow them to do that. Right? That won't be how one defines good science. It is not the limitation of the method, but the ability to answer a question properly and usefully. And I think we have to get ourselves to a place where we have clearer sense of when science is bad, and we are willing and able to actually define it as such.
Sure. I invite all of you to ask questions. I think there should be a Slido at some point that will come up, so please be ready to ask your questions to the panel. But while I invite the questions to come, yeah, there's the Slido, so feel free to ask your questions. I wanted to push Seye and some of you further. So you are talking about, we are pointing out to the problems, right? This kind of science or epidemiology is a problem. Lack of theory is the problem. People's meaningful engagement of communities in empowering ways is a problem. Fine. But what would possible solutions look like? What would you consider science that is transformative? What would you consider methods or approaches that are transformative? What would you consider justice producing or justice facilitating kind of science that our community should be investing in? Any thoughts on? Yeah?
I'm very brief. I'm very brief. And I think Fatuma was talking about that. We have an idealized pathway to change in our mind, and that pathway goes through policymakers. So we put ourselves in the service of what policymakers want. Right. Hold that. There's also a sense in which we put ourselves in the service of what funders want. Right. Now, funders say we should talk to policymakers. Funders and policymakers are very much alike in their power interests, right? So we are in the middle of these two powerful entities, and we are serving them. And in so doing, we significantly de-optimize ourselves from serving people. So for me, just basically redirecting our gaze, or the gaze we allow to influence our work, away from those two parties, will be a good place to start. To say, what does research that serves activism primarily look like? Right? Mm-hmm. And you begin to imagine differently the set of questions we'll be asking, the sort of methods we'll be using, and whom we'll be talking to, and in what ways. And sort of ways in which we frame our findings and our analysis becomes different. Right? Including, of course, going further and further upstream in how we frame the problem and how we identify the structures. Now, it does not remove from every now and again tackling problems that are downstream. But even when we do that, we do so with an eye upstream. In what ways can I solve this downstream problem in a way that allows people to go further upstream to really transform the conditions that shape their realities? So I think just broadly defining ourselves differently and our role differently, and getting clearer in our minds about the pathway to change, how change really happens in the world, very often, would be a good place to start.
Thank you, Sri.
I think the solution for me is cultivating health researchers that are as courageous in their work as the people resisting the structures that we remained indifferent to. And I'm just struck by the fact that we cannot ask certain questions, and I think it speaks to our proximity to a discipline as opposed to our loyalty to a people. And the questions that I ask come not from what will someone fund, but what is it our communities are calling us to do. And, you know, I worked in a sandstone, tenured academic with the research grants, and I learnt that my excellence would not protect me in this kind of work. And I offer this as a cautionary tale. We hang on to these places thinking if we use their language, if we're just good enough, we can get away with doing certain things to the point where it doesn't actually change anything. And there is so much joy and freedom that can be found in letting go of that idea. And being loyal to the very reason what brought us into the area of public health and the people that we're accountable to, taking a point about our accountability. And I mean, for me, my accountability is, so our knowledge, when we talk about Indigenous knowledge systems, I can't speak of anything I don't have a relationship to. Public health says we have to be objective and impartial. Blackfellas, we say, well, what's your connection to that? How can you speak on that if you don't have some kind of connection to it? So my day job is one job, but there's other work that I do and places that I exist within that are the foundation of my intellectual and political foundation that I remain loyal to. I happen to work in certain spaces, but it does not define how I think about the world. And I guess encourage people to think about the different ways they can do transformative work beyond the parameters we thought were possible.
I mean, I just wanted to add as well that having conversations about transforming knowledge systems is difficult when you don't have funders who fund these systems as well in the room, where we can hold them also accountable for the ways in which they fund research. And I echo, I mean, what has been said here is that there's no primacy for different types of research. It's really about the problem and the context and what works. And I think that deficit really became obvious or clear during COVID-19 again, where it was very clear that we needed multidisciplinary research in order to actually respond, right? So you spend a lot of money and a lot of time on biomedical initiatives, which is, we needed vaccines, but if no one is willing to take those vaccines, then it's not worth it. It's not going to be impactful. If we prioritize certain types of research and certain types of ways of knowing, then we leave out really the communities, and in the end we end up losing as well, and so as the people who are trying to make an impact in one way or another. So, I mean, I think that's really important to think about, even for the people who are funding research.
Thank you. I think a lot of very interesting perspectives are coming around, for example, use of theory, the need to engage with theory, and the need for a more critical engagement in how we frame questions and what we choose to problematize and how we choose to problematize, etc. Let me take, I mean, there's just a very huge number of things that I can pick up from here, but there's one thing that responds directly to the stuff that you're all talking about, which is about the social determinants of health, which has become, which is a very kind of a strong binding kind of a framework that the people in the health systems community have been engaging with. But one of our audience members points out to a problem which many of you pointed out in the framework, which is, does it make culture and lifestyle as something sanitized and one of those variables? It kind of variabilizes culture, and especially in the context, for example, of the Roma people, Indigenous people, even in the country where I come from, in India as well, and where you talk from. Often the way the problem is constructed is that, oh, you know, these people have a very distinct culture. So perhaps some reflections on that would be really one. Maybe we can start with you.
Well, back to those interesting tables and diagrams, I just find it interesting that we have these boxes like class. Sometimes we conflate race with ethnicity and culture in all kinds of interesting ways, and this counting this thing that hasn't been conceptualized, and as though class and race operate separately from each other. What's interesting, even beyond the poorly conceptualized things that sit there that have this authority, is they always trace back to the individual, behavioural and biomedical. They all point to how someone gets sick. And so it claims this structural approach, but ultimately all lines point back to what is wrong with black and brown people, and then how do we create policies and interventions that remedy their poor choices. And so I think social determinants has really failed us, and I think we need to be more critical of, again, the epidemiologist, for making claims about social structures when, if you study epidemiology, you don't understand those structures. You're taught how to count stuff, not conceptualize. I'm probably talking to the wrong crowd here, but...
No, not necessarily. You have very
this is, why, in terms of Indigenous health humanities, why we're looking to the humanities. Because, if you don't understand how race works, of course then you would think just measuring and showing that racism exists would affect change. Because you don't understand that race is embedded in the very laws in the society that we operate within, that race is part of the air that we breathe and that everyone is sustaining it. And so that's why the anti-racism research in health has failed us, because we've failed to understand how race works as a structure of power, but claiming the authority of knowing how to count it. And that's, certainly in the Australian context, the questions that get asked in health is, does racism exist, not how does it operate? Mm-hmm. And how does racism make black people feel bad about themselves? And I say this from our mob, and we call ourselves blackfellas, just to be clear, because we're raised as black and we're First Nations, and that's the term that we used to describe ourselves because our blackness came from that place. Our people have long resisted racism. We have been resilient to it. We have some strategies for it, and the public health professional is not going to teach us how to fight racism, how to cope with it better. So the questions that public health is asking about race and racism are actually offensive to those who are being negatively racialised.
Thank you very much. We are in the last few minutes, sadly, of the conversation. So what I will do, since we have about 3 to 4 minutes left, maybe from Fatuma, if because some of the questions here is about, if you're an early career researcher and you're listening to this panel or dealing with these, what, very briefly, in 2 or 3 lines, could I hear from each one of you, reflections, and what would be the message to an early career researcher who has to deal with social structures and with the problems, the way their seniors have been, the problematic ways in which their own seniors might have dealt with these issues? Any thoughts quickly?
I think one of the important things is finding that community of researchers who can give you that support that you need to actually question things and to challenge the status quo. And I think also not just community of young researchers such as yourselves, but also then looking to other researchers then who are speaking very actively about some of these issues and trying to connect with them. I think that's the first key step in doing that, because it is a challenge.
And perhaps the EV can stand up to
and
be that
especially
community.
The EV, the EV community.
Seye?
I think there's a lot of value in disciplining oneself. And by that I mean that if you know some things to be true, do not allow yourself to believe that they are not true, for expediency. Now, you may struggle, as I'm speaking here to early career researchers, you may struggle to do that which you know to be true and right. But do not give in to the temptation to convince yourself otherwise.
Thank you, Seye.
I agree with find your tribe, wherever they are. They may not be in your discipline. Find your people and think with them. I would also say take the long road, not the shortcut. And you'll see your colleagues advance for making concessions, but it's not worth it. Take the long road. I talk about being the black speed bump at tables. Be okay with being despised, disliked, dismissed, and embrace it as a badge of honour. And what I say to a lot of our early career researchers who we're building a home for, when they're at a crossroads on a decision, the question is, are you operating from fear or fire? And you make that choice.
Thank you. It's been an absolutely fantastic panel, and I doubt I could have done justice to the several questions that came. Let's look at this as a starting of a conversation. If many of you are feeling somewhat uncomfortable about your own research, I think speakers today make the point, and that's rightly so. And let's deal with that discomfort sometimes, and hopefully some light will come to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers and moderator. Truly wonderful, thought-provoking session, and I'm sure all of us are going to leave today really inspired to really work on our research and see the implications of it. So thank you again. So next we will move on to our closing ceremony. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce Professor Adnan Haider. Dr. Haider is Senior Associate Dean for Research and Innovation and Professor of Global Health at the Milken Institute School of Public Health. He is also our current HSG Chair.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us. First of all, what a splendid, thought-provoking, insightful, and stimulating panel that was. Thank you to those panelists, and thank you, Anna, for chairing them. I have only 2 tasks, so this is a small set of intervention from me. My first task is a thank you, and my second task will be a congratulations. My thank you task. I want to thank you, the membership of this society, for the privilege of having chaired your society for the past 2 years. Before that, been a vice chair for 2 years, and before that, being a board member. So 8 years of voluntary service, and in a very Japanese tradition, I would like to thank you for doing that. Together, we've grown the society. We've come to Nagasaki, over 1,500 of you from 114 countries. It's an incredible passion, drive, and energy that we've seen at this conference. It has been one of the greatest pleasures of this professional association. But there is one pleasure that is more outstanding than that, and that has been the recent board elections. And I'm so honored and delighted that we have new board members, but I'm only going to talk about the new elections that we've had. I'm honored to announce that Dr. Goran Zangana is going to be our new treasurer for the new board. Goran, congratulations. Dr. Anna Amaya, who just stepped down from the stage, is going to be our new vice chair of the board. Anna. And it is my great honor and privilege to not only invite him to the stage, but also welcome our new chair of Health Systems Global, Professor Taleb Mirzoev. Taleb. And Taleb, I hand over the society and this audience to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Adnan. Professor Adnan Haider. It's been a pleasure to serve with you on the board over the last 4 years, and I truly want to acknowledge your great commitment, leadership, dedication to the whole mission of the Health Systems Global and leadership of the Health Systems Global Board. I certainly have very big boots to fill, and I hope I can count on your valuable advice and guidance for at least in the foreseeable future. But I would also like to acknowledge valuable contributions from 3 other outgoing members of the HSG board. First, Professor Steph Top, who chaired our program working group for this symposium and carried, to be fair, the lion's share of the work herself on her shoulders. Then the second, Professor Daniel Macheira, who effectively led our Latin America and Caribbean regional network. Please feel free to. And then in absentia, Dr. Rima Fifi, whose valuable contributions were in many aspects, such as capacity strengthening and advocacy. Thank you.
Right, we've got a little bit of an agenda, but hopefully it will not take huge amount of time. So I will say a few thank yous. I will offer some reflections on the symposium and the context within which it is being held. I'll also provide an opportunity for our hosts to say some final words and concluding remarks. And finally, I will share news about our next symposium, which I suspect might have been one of the worst kept secrets so far, but we will get there. All right, so the 8th Global Symposium on Health Systems Research focused on building just and sustainable health systems, centering people and protecting the planet. So it comprised over 1,500 participants from 112 countries. Remarkably, the committee, scientific committee, reviewed over 3,000 abstracts, and we have been able to accommodate 4 plenaries, very successful ones, 61 organized sessions, 224 individual presentations across the 55 sessions, 25 capacity strengthening sessions, and 522 posters. So on behalf of the Health Systems Global, I would like to share my sincere thanks to all these individuals and organizations who were involved in making this happen. First and foremost, our co-sponsors and long-standing partners, the Alliance for Health Policy and Systems Research and the WHO. Also, multiple partners and supporters, Asian Development Bank, Gates Foundation, the World Bank, China Medical Board, Canadian International Development Research Centre, UK Department of Health and Social Care and National Institute for Health and Care Research, and NIHR, Chemonics International, our journal partners, Biomed Central, BMJ Global Health, BMJ Open, Health Policy and Planning, Health Systems and Reforms, everybody who was involved in the organization of the symposium, including the HSG Secretariat and local teams, and all plenary speakers, presenters, and of course all of you, the delegates. And last and not least, I would like to recognize the particular efforts of the program working group and the local organizing committee. So can I invite to the stage our vice chair, Dr. Anna Amaya. And can I also invite to the stage Professor Steph Top. So in recognition of the huge efforts of the program working group, we would like to offer you the small token of appreciation to receive on behalf of the whole society. So thank you from all of us. Can I also invite to the stage Professor Hiro Aiga, who was also the co-chair of the program working group, but also led the local organizing committee, to receive the small token of appreciation from the society. Well done, yes, absolutely. The high fives are very, very timely. Thank you very much. So the local organizing committee was led by the Nagasaki University and comprised JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, National Center for Global Health and Medicine, Nagasaki City Government, World Health Organization, Japanese Center for International Exchange, Japan CSO Network on Global Health, Japan Association on Global Health, Nagasaki Prefecture, and Asian Development Bank, Japan. So, on behalf of all of us, and I hope I will get it right, domo arigato gozaimasu. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, you can go. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So I would like to reflect a little bit next on the symposium and particularly the context within which it has been held. Everyone who I spoke with during the week reflected that the 8th Global Symposium for Health Systems Research has been a truly rewarding and inspirational experience that provided an effective platform for sharing knowledge and experiences and mutual learning. During the symposium, many of us also had an opportunity to recognize, learn about, and appreciate the strong narrative of peace and healing in Nagasaki, exemplified in multiple museums, memorials, and parks, and also evidenced in a grassroots movement of atomic bomb survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki being awarded fairly recently a Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to achieve a nuclear-free world. So the latter is particularly important within the context of ongoing wars and conflicts that destroy health systems and deprive people of health as their basic human rights. On 1st of July 2024, the outgoing or the previous configuration of the HSG board, following extensive deliberation, issued an HSG statement in support of health in Palestine. The full statement is available on the HSG website, and I would very much encourage you to read it and get a sense of the HSG's position. But in the meantime, I would like to highlight a few points just to remind ourselves of our stance and our values and our principles. The HSG believes in and upholds the international humanitarian law and Geneva Convention on human rights, which are both explicit in their protection of health infrastructure, including hospitals, medical staff, and ambulances, as well as sick and wounded. For all conflicts, the HSG therefore supports global demands for the following: an immediate and permanent ceasefire to support healthcare, the protection of all civilians on all sides, including health workers, and the safeguarding of remaining health facilities, the end to all forms of settler colonialism and apartheid that harms health systems and health of the people, and also full, unrestricted humanitarian access for fuel, water, food, medicines, and other necessary supplies. The HSG is committed to the strengthening of health systems for universal health coverage, which often also require deconstructing global power hegemonies and the centering of voices of anti-oppression movements for liberation. Examples of our specific commitments as a society in the statement included exploring mechanisms to support the rebuilding of the health systems through health policy and systems research, sharing the work and health data to highlight the health and health systems needs, investigating financial ties between the health systems global and pro-war institutions, and where those ties are found, disclosing and developing a plan for divesting from those ties. The July statement was a compromise, acceptance of multiple and different views within the board, taking account of the current political and financial climate. And it also focused specifically on the war in Gaza and West Bank. However, our position remains the same with regards to all wars and conflicts across the world, past and present. And I also hope that this reminder of the HSG's position provides a common reference point for all of us to maintain a united view as a community, which also reflects our shared values of social justice, protection of human rights, decolonization and equity, and also facilitates and promotes reflection, peace, and healing to enable health systems that serve everybody's needs. Thank you. Okay, on this very light note, I would like to invite to the stage our hosts to make some concluding remarks. So can I invite to this stage Professor Takeshi Nagayasu, who is the president of the Nagasaki University, and Miss and also Ms. Sachiko Imoto, Senior Vice President of Japan International Cooperation Agency. Please.
Distinguished guests and all participants, it is my great honor to share a few words with you on this special occasion. I believe that all participants have had a meaningful 5 days of sharing knowledge, learning from each other, discussing innovative solutions, and promoting collective action towards building just and sustainable health systems. The theme of HSR 2024 is truly timely in addressing today's most pressing health systems challenges, including climate change, evolving health threats in conflict settings, and social and economic disparities around the globe. The symposium provided a great opportunity to unite health system leaders, researchers, policymakers, and advocates from all over the world with a shared vision of and commitment to equitable, resilient, and sustainable health systems and societies. Now we will pass on the baton to the next host city. We, JICA, as a part of Health Policy and Systems Research community, will continue to work, co-create practical knowledge, and work for better development of equitable and sustainable health systems and achievement of universal health coverage in collaboration with partners around the world. Again, thank you very much for your participation, and let us continue to work together in solidarity.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, on behalf of the Nagasaki University and also the Nagasaki citizens, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all participants here. Today, it's my honor to pass the key, HS key to the new host city. So I heard that this HS key symbolizes the enduring of the legend of HSR. On the back of the board, it's englobing the 8th city. So first one, I will remember that Montreux that begins in the 2010s, and rest each one remarks Nagasaki. And next 9th one is honored to the next new host city. So during the past few days, you experienced here in Nagasaki will be, I believe that the fruitful opportunity, that already the chairperson talked about, our city is awarded by the Nobel Peace Prize in this year. The fact that this HSR symposium held in Nagasaki means the special meanings. So not only the Nagasaki is not only the origin of the Western medicine in Japan, but also the origin of global health. So gathered in Nagasaki, we really, recognize that at this moment, the lot of people continue to suffer and to lose their lives in the conflict areas, such as Ukraine and also Gaza and Myanmar, and as well as the conflict regions. So I really recommend to keep the sustainability and the resilience and the functional the health system even in such areas. So finally, I hope the spirit of the resilience of the sustainability of this symposium hosted here in Nagasaki will continue to the next city in 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Sachiko Imoto and Professor Takeshi Nagayasu. Okay, we're nearly there. So as you know, the location of the global HSR symposia is usually rotated to enable expansion and capacity strengthening across the different regions. And we're usually operating within the framework of the WHO regions. So out of 1,500 delegates of the Nagasaki Symposium, actually 27% were from Southeast Asian region, 22% of participants were from African region, 18% of participants were from the European region, 17% were from Americas, 14% were from the Western Pacific region, and 2% were from Eastern Mediterranean region. The selection of the venue for the symposia is typically guided by the combination of different criteria, such as availability of expertise in HPSR, capacity to host fairly large event, transport links, accommodation, and so on. And I'm pleased to announce that the 9th Global Symposium for Health Systems Research will be held in November 2026 in Eastern Mediterranean region in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And we see this as an exciting opportunity, not only to promote the field of, you can see the number has changed to 2026, absolutely. We see this as an opportunity not only to promote the field of HPSR in this very neglected EMR, Eastern Mediterranean region, but also an opportunity for all of us, for our vibrant and inclusive HPSR community to bring our message and values to the region. So I would like to invite representatives of the consortium who will host the next symposium to the stage to receive the key from the current hosts. Please welcome to the stage Professor Emmanuel Azad Munisa, Professor at Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government, who is the lead health policy research program. Welcome. And also please welcome Dr. Rasha Fadlallah, Senior Health Policy and Systems Research at American University of Beirut and Senior Scientific Officer at Knowledge to Policy Center, and also the HSG board member. So with that, can I request our current hosts to pass on our symposium key, which is the tradition, to our incoming hosts. Please. please, please. Fantastic. Please take a seat. So now we will have a brief introduction to the new context of our next symposium. Please, can we have a video on our IT team? Thank you.
Welcome to the Eastern Mediterranean region, a dynamic intersection of history, resilience, and innovation, a region marked by contrasts yet united in its aspirations. Our health systems carry the weight of our histories, our resilience, and our shared future. In the face of wars, conflicts, and the challenges of recovery, we are also confronted with global disruptions, climate change, rapid urbanization, and the rising tide of non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases account for 79% of all deaths, a rate higher than the global average. Lifestyle factors, high smoking rates, rising obesity, and physical inactivity have driven increases in heart disease, cancer, diabetes, and chronic respiratory illnesses. Environmentally, the Eastern Mediterranean region is the most water-scarce region in the world, with 60% of the population living in areas under high or very high water stress, compared to a global average of 35%. Also, the Eastern Mediterranean is warming almost 2 times faster than the global average and other inhabited parts of the world. Climate change aggravates existing challenges, impacting health. Although the Eastern Mediterranean region comprises only 9% of the global population, it accounts for 43% of global humanitarian needs. The region is also at the center of one of the world's largest refugee crises, hosting 64% of the world's refugees. Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan have become the world's largest sanctuaries. Yet, alongside these realities, we see an enduring spirit of innovation and a determination to build something stronger in the Eastern Mediterranean region. From pioneering AI-driven health diagnostics to improve care delivery, to advancing digital health, genomics, and precision medicine, building health systems for the future. These contrasting realities, regions facing immediate crises and others building health systems of the future, offer a backdrop for a transformative impact. Across the EMR, we all share the urgency of building health systems that are resilient. This is where the 9th Global Symposium on Health Systems Research will unite minds from around the world. The winning bid was put forward by the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, in partnership and collaboration with the Knowledge to Policy Center at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. Meeting the needs of our populations requires an integrated approach that connects health with the Sustainable Development Goals and understanding the interplay between geopolitics, global health priorities, health systems, and patient care. Hosting the 9th Global Symposium on Health Systems Research in the Eastern Mediterranean region, specifically in Dubai, marks an exciting milestone. This is a call to action to unite diverse perspectives, innovate and rethink health policy and systems research that truly reflects our shared realities and values. The region has a vibrant public and private sector, along with active civil society groups. As we come together, this symposium provides an invaluable opportunity to reflect on the health systems we need, systems that are resilient and capable of addressing the unique challenges we face in our interconnected world. We look forward to welcoming you in 2026 in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a true honor to stand before you today as we begin the journey towards organizing the 9th Global Symposium on Health System Research, HSR 2026, in the Eastern Mediterranean region. On behalf of the Knowledge to Policy Center at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon, we warmly welcome you to this exciting and pivotal moment for health system research. As we prepare for HSR 2026, we are eager to launch the global and regional consultation that will shape the symposium vision, especially as we look ahead to post-SDG era. This platform is your opportunity to share ideas, insights, strategies that will ensure that we will achieve yet another impactful and successful symposium. As a global health system, global society, we must rise to the challenge of shaping global health priorities in a time of rapidly shifting political landscapes and increasing threats to evidence-informed decision-making. HSR 2026 will be a unique moment to forge strategic alliances, bridge diverse intellectual and regional perspectives, and unlock the collective potential to strengthen health systems worldwide. Together, we will confront some of the most pressing challenges in health policy and system research, including the impact of climate change in health system, the intersections of geopolitics, global health priorities, and health system resilience, and the opportunities presented by AI and digital health to advance equity and improve access to care. As we look forward to HSR 2026, we are inspired by the possibilities and confident in what we achieve together. We are so excited to welcome all of you in our region in the Middle East in 2026. Thank you.
The 9th Global Health Symposium will be held in Dubai. We're very excited as the Mohammed bin Rashid School of Government in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, in close collaboration with the American University of Beirut, the Knowledge to Policy Center in Lebanon. We're looking forward to welcoming you to our vibrant city where innovative and great minds will come together on a global platform to discuss health systems research. We look forward to welcoming you to HSR 2026 in Dubai.
As a member of the Health System Global Board, representing the Eastern Mediterranean region, I am proud to be part of a journey that will bring the world's brightest minds together in our region to shape the future of health systems. HSR 2026 is not just another conference. It is a call to action, a moment for us to unite, innovate, and build partnerships that will not only address urgent challenges, but also reimagine what is possible for the future of global health systems. Advancing health policy and systems research in our region, especially in the face of ongoing polycrisis, growing inequality, and overstretched health system, are vital not only for achieving the SDG by 2030, but also for ensuring better health outcomes and social justice for all beyond the 2030 era. As we leave Nagasaki more energized and inspired, we look forward to welcoming you all to the Eastern Mediterranean region in 2026. أهلا وسهلا فيكم بالشرق الأوسط.
Right, colleagues and friends, that concludes our ceremony. So thank you very much for coming. Travel safely home. See you next time and stay well and safe in the meantime. Thank you very much. Did you feel all right?
Oh, it's great, thank you.
Yeah. Let me just thank him. Yeah, no, congratulations. Thank you once again. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. And we really appreciate your support and hosting. And I hope we also remain partners for next symposium and for years to come. And, yeah, so thank you very much. Thank you. Please.
どうもありがとうございました。いえいえいえ。本当に長崎大学の皆さんに全面的に支えていただいてありがとうございました。
handshakes. We're already in the hugging zone. Great ceremony.
Attention please, if you're from the AMR. Hello, AMR people, please. We need to take a photo next to the HSR 2026. If you are from the AMR, join us.